Okay, our topic for today is data and information. So what are we going to learn in this topic? During this topic, we will learn one, the definition of data and information. Then we'll look at the types and sources of data and information. Then we'll proceed to looking at the differences between data and information. Then we'll now look at qualities of good information. Then the fifth thing we're going to look at is the classification of information. How is information being classified? Which will now take us to the sixth point, description of how data is processed into information. And finally, we shall look at the need for computer in information processing. So what is data? Well, data can be defined as an unprocessed information. Data can also be seen as raw facts or figures about an activity or about an event. It could also be about somebody or something or some place. So data is a plural form of datum, which is the singular form of data. We said data can also be a raw facts about somebody. Now let's look at an example of a student's personal data. For example, let's see some facts, some raw facts we know have about this particular student. Let's say this student's name is Tega Musa Adebayo. That's the student's name. And let's say his address, that's where the student lives. Let's say he lives at number 4 Osato Street in Benin City. And let's say this child is 12 years old. These are data we have about this particular child. He's 12 years old and his gender is male. This is data that we have about this particular student. We're going to come back to use this later. But first of all, let's talk about types of data. There are different types of data. Okay, which are these raw files, facts or figures. Now, what are some of these types of data that we have? We have the numeric data, we have the alphabetic data, the alphanumeric data, the audio data, yes, and also the graphic data. So let's talk about the first type of data, which is the numeric data. Numeric data. When you hear numeric, what comes to your mind? Numbers. Yes, these are numbers. So this kind of data, these are data that are figures and that are number in nature. Okay, figures and number. That is kind of data. Now, if you check very well, that example I showed earlier, this student's age there is 12. So the numeric data we have about this particular student, which is Tega Musa Adebayo, is that his age is 12. So that 12 there is an example of numeric data that we have about Adebayo. The next type of data we're going to look at is the alphabetic data. Alphabetic data, yes, the alphabets. When you hear alphabetic, it has to do with the alphabets. So alphabetic data, these can be letters, it can be names, it can be places, classification, anything that has to do with alphabets. Any data that you have that has to do with alphabets, putting letters together. This is an example of alphabetic data. Okay, it's sometimes called labels too. Yeah. So now that's example I gave earlier about Tega Musa Adebayo. Now let's look at some of the alphabetic data we have about him. His name, for example, is alphabetic, Tega Musa Adebayo. Then his gender, male, is also alphabetic. So these are alphabetic data we have about these students, Tega. You guess. So now let's talk about the next type of data, which is the alphanumeric data. Alphanumeric data. This type of data contains both letters, which are alphabets, and numbers. This picture, for example, you're seeing is an address. It has both number and alphabet. Then look at the other picture, is a place number. It has both number and alphabet too. Now let's go back to that example of Tega Musa Adebayo's data. The address there, 4 Osato Street, Benin City, is an example of alphanumeric data. It contains both alphabet and numbers. Alright, so that's what we see there for. So the next type of data is the audio data. Audio data. Audio data are also called voice data. They can be sent into the computer through a microphone. An example is when you record your voice into the computer. Like what this lady here is doing right now. She's reading what she has on her hand through the aid of the microphone. So she's sending out the voice data through the microphone so that it can get inside the computer or throughout the speaker, as the case may be. So that's how you send audio data. Then see this young man too is probably doing a voice note. With our social media platforms, you can send messages to people using voice notes. You just record your voice and send there to people. So the next type of data we're going to look at is the graphics data. The graphic data. The graphic data is also called the visual data. Yes, the visual data, or it's also called the video data. These could be pictures, images, diagrams, camera images, and so on and so forth. Like the pictures you see on the screen now, these are examples of graphic data. Those are charts, bar charts, those display you have there. These are examples of graphics data. And there you even see a video there playing. Yes, this is an example of graphic data. Sources of data. It has to do with the various ways in which data is being collected. Well, basically we have two main sources of data collection, which is the primary and the secondary source. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to be looking at three sources here, which is through the interviewing. Now, this has to do with documentation of facts obtained from an interview through oral communication. Like we see there, the lady is interviewing the other lady there, and information, the data she got, she's documenting them. So that's one way you get data, through interview. Then data have been recorded. Another one we're going to look at is through observation. By observation. So data can also be gotten by taking note of things that happen around us. We observe carefully what happened around us, and the data we get will be recorded. We can keep it using tally sheets. It could be pictures of what is happening around us, diagrams, and we'll keep everything neatly. Document analysis is another way of sourcing for data. Yes, it has to do with reading or breaking down of various records. Then the facts that are gotten from those documents, observations, are not documented. It can also be said to refer to as the various procedures involved in analyzing or interpreting data that is generated from examinations of documents. Then those facts and figures can then be documented. Okay, let's talk about information. What is information? Well, information is processed data. Data that has been processed. Information simply refers to data that has been converted into a more meaningful form. Unlike data, which are raw facts and figures, information are being processed. So we can say information is the end product of data when it has passed through processing. Yeah, that is what information is. Now, to help us understand better, let's do some mathematics here. A little math. Let's say data plus processing, it's equal to what? Information. Exactly. So that's how it works. Now, to help us understand better, let's take a look at some data that were collected from some students after their tests. Now we see their names and their various scores there. These are data gotten from them. Now let's say the computer is programmed to record 40 as the pass mark. Since the computer is programmed to record 40, we can easily tell those that passed the test and those that didn't. If you are asked to look for the person with the highest score, for example, you can easily say it's Precious, because Precious has 65%. Then what if you are told to look for the lowest score, the person with the lowest score? That's 25%. It belongs to who? 25% belongs to Fejiro. So that's how you draw information from data. Now let's see qualities of good information. Good information, one, has to be timely, meaning it must be available at the right time. Two, it has to be accurate. It means it has to be correct and free from error. Good information also has to be relevant, meaning it should relate to the subject at hand. It also has to be comprehensive, meaning it must be full and complete and easy to understand. Economical, by not being too costly such that the user can afford it. Suitable, it should be for the right purpose. Meaningful, it must be expressed in a language and in a way that can easily be understood. And reliable, it must be unfailing. Okay, now information can be classified in three ways. One, the form in which information exists. Two, the time of occurrence. And three, the frequency of occurrence. Now the first one, let's look at the first classification. That is classification based on the form in which the information exists. So it could be in written form, that is written information. It could be in oral form. It could be visual information. It could be sensory, that is has to do with our various sense organs through smelling, touching, seeing and all that. Now the second classification is based on time of occurrence. So information could be historic. Information too could be present, and information can also be in past terms, that is past information. Now the third classification of information is based on the frequency of occurrence. So it could be hourly, it could be daily, it could be monthly, termly, or annually, that is annual information. So these are the various classifications. So now let's look at data processing steps, the various steps which are involved in data processing. There are basically 5 steps. The first step is data origination. This has to do with data collection. How data is being collected at the first instance. Then it will now lead to data preparation. It has to do with sorting of the data and arranging them in a particular order. It could be alphabetically or in an order that can easily be retrieved. Then the next step is data input. This has to do with putting in the data that has been gathered or sorted out inside the computer through the input devices. Then that will now lead to data processing. This will be done within the computer by the computer processor, after which it will lead to information outputs. When the data is done processing, it will all lead to information outputs. Then one can decide to print out of the computer, then through the printer. So all these two can also be saved to the computer storage. Now that we've seen the various steps needed in data processing, now let's talk about the need for computer in information processing. Why is computer so important for processing information? Well, information needs to be processed into a form that will be available whenever it is needed. As a result of this, there is a need to store information in a meaningful and more efficient way. Now let's talk about some other reasons why we need computer to process information. The first one is increased accuracy. The computer doesn't make mistake. Then efficient storage facility. It can save large volume of data within a short period of time. Then speed is very fast. Complexity, the computer is able to handle complex data. And consistency, it doesn't get tired like humans. It keeps working and working. So these are why we need computer for data processing. So let's see all we've been talking so far. So we've been talking about what data and information is all about. So far we've defined data, then we've also seen define information, we've seen types of data, we've looked at qualities of information, then we've also seen how data is being processed, the various steps it goes through before it becomes information. And just now we looked at why computer is very important for information processing. So thank you for watching. Bye for now. See you on the next one.